What you could do, if you were a malicious actor, is you could make it appear as if you're sending an email from one of the MPs or one of the cabinet ministers or the prime minister to one of these staffers saying, hey, I need you to get me this information, and I need you to get me it now. News broke today that the House of Commons was hit by a cyber attack where employee information, email addresses, and device information was stolen. I have two questions. One, could this have been prevented? And two, was the public service asleep at the wheel? Let's take a look. House of Commons hit by cyber attack from threat actor, internal email. Breach data includes information about government employees and devices. The House of Commons and Canada's Cybersecurity Agency are investigating a significant data breach caused by an unknown quote-unquote threat actor targeting employee information. According to an internal email obtained by CBC News, the House of Commons alerted staff on Monday that there was an information breach. It said a malicious actor was able to exploit a recent Microsoft vulnerability to gain unauthorized access to a database containing information used to manage computers and mobile devices. Some of the information obtained by the hacker is not available to the public, according to the email. That includes employee names, job titles, office locations, and email addresses, as well as information regarding their House of Commons managed computers and mobile devices. The CSE defines a threat actor as a group or individual that aims, quote, with malicious intent, end quote, to gain unauthorized access to or otherwise affect victims' data, devices, systems, and networks. A recent report from the CSE found that adversarial nations, including the People's Republic of China, Russia, and Iran, are increasingly behind cyber threats to Canada. But the agency said it's too early to tell who or what was behind this breach. Quote, attribution of a cyber incident is difficult. Investigating cyber threat activity takes resources and time, and there are many considerations involved in the process of attributing malicious cyber activity, end quote, said the CSE in a statement. The cyber attack happened on Friday, according to the email sent to employees. It calls on employees and members of the House of Commons to be especially vigilant, as information accessed during the breach could be used in scams or to target and impersonate parliamentarians. In a statement, the House of Commons said it was working with national security partners to investigate the matter, but would not disclose information, including how many employees are affected, citing the ongoing probe. The most recent National Cyber Threat Assessment from the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity reports that Canada is considered a quote-unquote valuable target for criminals and state adversaries looking to disrupt systems. It also found a, quote, sharp increase in both the number and severity of cyber incidents, end quote, over the past 2 years. Well, this is an interesting one, since this is right up my alley and in my specialty. So, a couple things about this. Number one, that last paragraph there that said, the most recent report said that Canada, is a target for this. I just want everybody to know that this is not new. And I know it's not new because we had received internal information from the Canadian Centre of Cybersecurity 3 years ago now, warning the agencies that we should expect increased threats from foreign actors and threat actors as a result of the war in Ukraine and the destabilization of what was going on in Asia, with China getting more threatening, and all of that. So this is not new. Now, the other thing that it talked about was it talked about what actual database this actually targeted. Now, to the average person who doesn't know a lot about computers, it just sounds like they hit a database. But the way they described this is actually really concerning to me, and it's probably concerning to any IT person that's reading this. See, they described this as obtaining this information from a database used to manage employees and in computers and their devices. So one of the things that pops into my mind is there's a system called Active Directory. Now, Active Directory, imagine that as basically your master phone book for an organization that has all of the accounts, all of the usernames, all of the passwords, all of the computer devices, email addresses, job titles, everything. Based on how this is described, that's what it sounds like they were able to get at. And that's concerning because that should not be easily accessible from outside of the company. That's one of your most valuable and should be most protected systems in your network. So if these hackers were actually able to get into there, that should be scaring the heck out of everybody in IT. Now, House of Commons is managed by a bunch of IT people, and they're part of what's called Shared Services Canada. That's like the internal government IT machine that actually runs. And they're responsible for putting out bulletins, for providing support, and there's individual agencies in there and arms that actually, helps the government manage its IT infrastructure and protect against it. One of them being the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. That's its own agency and it has its own specialist. But another thing that really concerns me about this is, could this have been prevented? And I ask that because the article mentioned a recent vulnerability. Well, if you take a look at the Canadian Centre of Cybersecurity's website, it actually has vulnerabilities listed there, and there's a critical one that was released there very recently. This is what it is: vulnerability impacting Microsoft SharePoint Server Update 3. On July 19th, and we're right at the bottom, Microsoft published a customer guidance for a critical SharePoint vulnerability that appears to be affecting all versions on-premises SharePoint Server. SharePoint Online in Microsoft 365 is not impacted. So this vulnerability, it's possible that a external facing server was accessed by this threat actor, and they were able to actually get in there and get to the data that they wanted to get. The thing is about this bulletin is it was put up there on July 22nd. Microsoft had developed a patch for the specific vulnerability on July 19th. The attack happened on August 8th. So, if this was indeed that vulnerability, the question is why wasn't it patched? Now, a patch closes one door of a system, but I'm not the one that brought up the vulnerability. The article was, and the article seemed to reference an internal email that was actually sent around that seemed to point to that as the reason that the actual attack was made. It's possible it was another vulnerability. It's possible it wasn't. But the fact is that they knew that the system was vulnerable. And there's a couple of things that you can do there. But before we get into that, I want to walk you through what is called a zero-day attack, or a zero-day attack cycle known in the IT world. So there's lots of complex systems out there and computer software and all kinds of things that IT people work with. So a lot of times what happens is there's vulnerabilities all over the place, and an attacker, either a security research analyst or an actual malicious person, discovers that there's a vulnerability in a system. They then figure out how to abuse that vulnerability and actually take advantage of it, and then allows them to potentially get elsewhere into a network, disrupt the system, or extradite data from it. They then exploit that and start to compromise sites. The vulnerability is then discovered by researchers or developers. Could have been a researcher that discovers this in the first place, but let's just go with a threat actor. And then what ends up happening is the software provider for that particular system ends up developing a patch to actually release that. Oftentimes what happens is there is a alert that's put out when they discover this vulnerability before a patch is even released. And they will then tell you, this is what you can do to mitigate or even prevent this vulnerability from happening while we develop a patch. So you can do a lot of different things from an IT perspective to deal with that. Closing the doors, shutting the windows, so to speak. Did the government do this? I don't know. I don't know what was done. But it's interesting because even in that article, they say, well, investigating an incident like this takes time and takes resources. Yes, it does. You have a whole agency called the Canadian Centre of Cybersecurity that was always touted to us that these guys, they can help you at any time. They can help you at any time, but I don't know. Were they of help here? Maybe they weren't even allowed to help, because sometimes if they don't know there's an issue with a system or with a specific agency's systems, then they can't help. Some IT guys say, well, patching breaks things. Well, patching breaks things, yes, but not patching things allows them to be hacked, which causes a whole lot more work, causes people to potentially lose their jobs, and you got to end up patching it anyway. Or you have to rebuild that system from scratch, which costs a lot more money. So the other question that people may have is, why would these people steal employee information like names and job titles and email addresses? Who cares? Well, here's the thing. All of these email addresses of these employees in the House of Commons, that's not public facing, meaning you can't look that up on the internet. So if you end up getting all that information, what you could do, if you were a malicious actor, is you could make it appear as if you're sending an email from one of the MPs or one of the cabinet ministers or the prime minister to one of these staffers saying, hey, I need you to get me this information. And I need you to get me it now. And the person could believe that, get that information, and then send potentially secure information outside the government network into the hands of a threat actor, potentially a foreign state. This is why a hack like this, even though the information isn't what you would call mission critical, it could lead to very, very dangerous, and even threats to national security in terms of the impact that it can have. So this is something that the government should look into. The government recently promoted, I think it was a year or two ago, an internal person that was in the government to the Chief Information Officer position, which, when it comes to government, I don't think is a good idea. Because the last person they brought in that came from outside saw that there was a whole bunch of systemic problems within the government's IT infrastructure and IT personnel structure and wanted to make a lot of changes, started tearing her hair out, and she said, screw it, I'm done. You're not going to listen to anything I say. You're going to throw roadblocks up in front of me. I'm out of here. So it was much easier to promote somebody from inside who has no outside experience when it comes to IT. Great job, government. This is the result.